Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are stripping away, the white marble columns, the pristine statues, and that soft philosophical lighting we usually associate with ancient Greece.
We are, yeah.
We're going back to a time before the Golden Age, to a version of Athens that feels less like a university campus and more like a city on the verge of a violent nervous breakdown.
It really is a completely different world. We're dialing the clock back to the early 6th century BC, so roughly around 630 to 560 BC. And the man we're focusing on today, Solon, is often just a footnote in history classes.
Right.
You might remember the name, maybe you know he was a lawgiver, but his actual story is wild. He's the man who arguably invented the concept of the citizen, and he did it while writing poetry and, managing a society that was about 5 minutes away from eating itself alive.
That's a massive claim, inventing the citizen, because before this, if you lived in Athens, what were you? Just a subject, or like a member of a tribe.
Exactly. You were defined by your family, your tribe, or your debt. You were a subject to the powerful. Solon comes along and essentially tries to hack the operating system of Athens. And the most cinematic part is how he did it. He wasn't a general who marched in with an army. He was a poet who was handed absolute autocratic power by people who were just desperate for anyone to fix the mess.
It sounds like the plot of a political thriller. The poet dictator.
Yeah.
But before we get to his solutions, we have to understand the problem. Because I think when we picture Athens, we picture democracy, people voting, philosophers chatting in the agora. But that's not the Athens Solon walked into, is it?
Not even close. That famous democracy is a century away. The Athens of Solon's time was, for all intents and purposes, a failed state. It was a nightmare scenario.
Right.
Imagine a city that is completely paralyzed by inequality, where the rich have everything, the poor have nothing, and the tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. It wasn't a debate club, it was a powder keg.
So the mission of this deep dive is to figure out how this one man, Solon, managed to walk into that burning building and not only survive, but lay the foundation for Western civilization.
It's an incredible story.
We're going to look at his radical economic reforms, his rewriting of the Constitution, and this fascinating idea he had of holding a shield of might over both the rich and the poor.
And we're going to ask the big question, did it actually work? Because as we'll see, in his own lifetime, the answer was, well, it was a bit complicated.
And just to flag our sources today, we are pulling from a great stack. We've got historical records, we've got the heavy hitters like Plutarch, Herodotus, and Aristotle. But coolest of all, we have fragments of Solon's own poetry.
Which is so rare.
It's amazing. You get the actual voice of the person from 2,600 years ago.
It is. It gives us a window into his psychology, his motives, that we just don't get with other figures from this period.
Okay, so let's set the scene properly. Section 1, the crisis. How bad was it really? You used the phrase nightmare scenario.
It was catastrophic. The primary driver was the wealth gap. But we're not talking about, the 1% owning more stocks than the 99%.
No, this is more fundamental.
It's about land and liberty. The arable land in Attica, that's the region around Athens, was almost entirely in the hands of a few noble families called the eupatrids.
Eupatrids, that sounds fancy.
It literally means the well-born, or those with good fathers.
Of course it does.
They controlled the politics, the religion, and most importantly, the economy. And the poor. They were suffering under a brutal, absolutely brutal system of debt.
Let's unpack that debt. Because today, if you have debt, maybe your credit score tanks, maybe the bank takes your car. But in Solon's Athens, the stakes were a little higher.
Much higher. The horror of debt in this period was that the collateral wasn't your property.
It was your body.
It was your body. If you were a poor farmer, a sharecropper, and you had a bad harvest or a drought hit, you still owed your rent or your loan payments to the eupatrid lord. If you couldn't pay, the creditor had the legal right to seize you, your wife, and your children and sell you into slavery.
That is absolutely terrifying. You could wake up a free Athenian, have a bad season of rain, and end up being shipped across the Mediterranean as a piece of property.
It happened constantly. The sources describe the countryside as being filled with these visual symbols of oppression called horos.
Horos. I saw that term in the notes. These were what, boundary markers?
Yes, usually stone or wooden pillars standing on the farmland. But they weren't just fences marking where your land ended and mine began. If you saw a horos standing on a field, it was a public declaration of a mortgage.
Like a foreclosure sign, but infinitely worse.
Worse, because it meant the person working that land didn't really own their labor anymore. It was a sign that said, this land and the people on it are under obligation to a creditor. It was a constant physical reminder that you were living on borrowed time. The farmers working this land were often called hectomoroi, or sixth parters.
Sixth parters. Does that mean they kept a sixth of their crop, or they had to give away a sixth?
Scholars debate it, but the prevailing view is often that they had to hand over a sixth of their produce. Or maybe, even worse, they only got to keep a sixth.
Either way, you're not getting rich.
You're not. You're living on the razor's edge of subsistence, and if they missed that quota, it was slavery.
So you have a population that is terrified, hungry, and watching their neighbors disappear into slavery. That is the definition of a pre-revolutionary situation.
Exactly. And this economic misery fractured the city into three distinct rival factions. And what's fascinating is that the ancient historians describe these factions geographically. It feels almost like a fantasy novel or a dystopian YA book.
I love this detail.
You had the hill, the plain, and the coast.
Okay, it makes it so visual. Who were the people of the hill?
The hill represented the poor, the people in the highlands where the soil was rocky and bad. These were the radical Democrats, the people who had nothing to lose. They wanted to flip the table. They wanted a total redistribution of land.
The radicals. Then you have the plain. I'm guessing that's where the good farmland was.
Right. The rich landowners, the eupatrids, they were the oligarchs. They wanted to keep the system exactly as it was because, well, it was making them rich. They were the conservatives.
And the coast.
The coast was the middle ground. Traders, fishermen, craftsmen, they were the moderates. They didn't want the radical anarchy of the hill, but they didn't want the stifling oppression of the plain either.
They just wanted stability.
They just wanted stability so they could do business.
So you have the radicals, the reactionaries, and the moderates, all hating each other. And on top of that, the rich families were fighting each other too.
Oh, the clan rivalries were intense. This wasn't just class warfare. It was Game of Thrones-style feuds between powerful families. The city was paralyzed. They couldn't make decisions. They were weak.
Enter Solon. Who was this guy? Where did he fit into this three-way cage match?
And that's the key to his rise. He was a living contradiction. By blood, he was a eupatrid. He was born into a noble family. He could trace his lineage back to the legendary King Croesus.
Okay.
So socially, he sat at the high table. The witch trusted him because he was one of them.
But he didn't act like a typical snobby aristocrat?
No. His father had apparently diminished the family fortune through generosity, so Solon had to work. He became a merchant. He traveled. He got involved in commerce.
Which was really unusual for nobles back then, right? Didn't they usually look down on anyone who had to work for a living?
Extremely unusual. Most nobles thought trade was vulgar. But this gave Solon a unique perspective. He understood the economic realities of the traders on the coast. He understood the struggles of the poor, but he spoke the language of the rich on the plain. He was the only person who could talk to everyone.
He also had a bit of a flair for the dramatic. We have to tell the Solon story. This is the moment where he goes from respected merchant to, like, national hero.
This is a great story. So Athens had been fighting a long, losing war against its neighbor, Megara, for control of the island of Salamis. It was a disaster.
Total humiliation.
The total humiliation. The Athenians were so demoralized that the assembly passed a law making it a capital crime, punishable by death, to even propose continuing the war.
That is profound denial.
Yeah.
We are losing so badly that if you mention the war, we will kill you.
They had completely given up. But Solon couldn't accept the shame of it. He was a patriot. But he couldn't speak out legally. So Plutarch tells us he feigned madness.
He pretended to have a mental breakdown.
He put on a traveler's cap, which was weird to wear indoors in the city, and he ran into the marketplace, jumped up on the herald's stone, and just started screaming a poem he had written.
A poem, of course. It always comes back to poetry with this guy.
It was a nationalist anthem. Let us go to Salamis, to fight for the lovely island and wipe away our shame. Because he was acting mad, he couldn't be prosecuted under the law.
That's brilliant.
But the poem was so powerful and his performance was so electric that the crowd got fired up.
He literally rafted his way into a military campaign.
Essentially. The young men grabbed their weapons, Solon was put in charge, and they actually won. They took the island back.
That showed he had charisma. He could manipulate public opinion.
Exactly. So fast forward to 594 BC. The debt crisis is peaking. The poor are sharpening their farming tools, ready to revolt. The rich are terrified of being slaughtered in their homes. And both sides look at Solon, the hero of Salamis, the noble merchant, and say, you fix it.
He was chosen as Archon, right? Chief magistrate.
Yes, the chief magistrate. But they gave him extraordinary powers. He was basically made a dictator for a limited time to rewrite the laws and save the city.
So no pressure. You have absolute power, everyone hates everyone, and if you fail, the city burns. Where does he even start?
He starts with the most immediate source of pain, the debt. He enacts a set of reforms known as the Seisachtheia.
Seisachtheia, that's a great word. What does it translate to?
The shaking off of burdens. It's poetic, but the action was concrete and immediate. He ordered the removal of the horos markers.
So those stones in the fields, he just said, rip them out.
Rip them out, smash them. He annulled the contracts. If you owed money that was secured by your land or your person, that debt was wiped out, gone. It was a massive debt jubilee.
That is radical.
Oh.
But the biggest change was the one about slavery, right?
Yes. This was the fundamental shift. He prohibited for all time the practice of using a person's body as collateral for a loan. He established a fundamental human right for Athenians. No matter how poor you are, you cannot be enslaved by your fellow citizen.
So he didn't just cancel the current debts, he changed the rules of the game forever.
He even went further. He used state funds to track down Athenians who had been sold abroad into slavery, bought them back, and brought them home. The sources say some of them had been gone so long they had forgotten the Attic dialect.
That is an incredible image. These people returning home, relearning their language, regaining their freedom. But there is always a but. I have to imagine the people who were owed that money were absolutely furious.
Oh, the rich were livid. He was destroying their wealth. He was vaporizing their assets. And to make matters worse, there was a huge scandal.
A scandal, do tell.
Well, the story goes that shortly before Solon announced the Seisachtheia, he confided in a few close friends aristocrats with names like Conon and Clinius. He told them, hey, I'm going to cancel the debts, but I'm not going to redistribute the land.
Oh, no. That sounds like insider information.
It was. These friends immediately went out and borrowed huge sums of money. They used that cash to buy up massive amounts of land. A few days later, Solon cancels the debts.
So they keep the land.
They keep the land they just bought, but they don't have to pay back the loans. They made a killing.
That looks terrible. It looked like Solon rigged the system to enrich his buddies.
It looked incredibly suspicious. Solon was accused of being in on the con. He had to publicly defend himself, and his defense was basically, look, I lost money too.
Okay.
He claimed he had loaned out 5 talents of his own money, which was a fortune, and he canceled those debts along with everyone else's. He argued, why would I cost myself a fortune just to help these guys?
I'm broke too, so I must be innocent. It's a bold defense.
It worked enough to keep him in power. But here's the kicker, and this really shows the tightrope he was walking. The Seisachtheia made the rich hate him because they lost money, but the poor were angry too.
Why? He saved them from slavery.
They wanted more. They wanted what the Hill faction promised, land redistribution. They wanted Solon to take the big estates of the wealthy and chop them up into equal plots for everyone.
But Solon refused.
He refused. He said, I gave you your freedom. I'm not going to destroy the social order completely. He described himself in his poetry as a wolf surrounded by yapping dogs. He was being attacked from all sides.
That brings us to the shield metaphor we mentioned. He wasn't trying to make one side win, he was trying to stop the fight.
Exactly. But once he stopped the immediate bleeding with the debt relief, he had to perform the surgery. He had to fix the broken system that caused the mess in the first place. He had to rewrite the Constitution.
This is section 3, and this is where Solon really changes history. Because up until this point, power in Athens was all about your bloodline. It was about who your daddy was.
Correct. It was an aristocracy. Solon shifted the entire basis of political power from aristocracy to timocracy.
Timocracy, that's a word we don't hear often.
It means power based on wealth, or more specifically, power based on production. Solon looked at Athens and said, it shouldn't matter if your last name is Codrus. It matters what you contribute to the economy. So he divided the citizens into 4 classes based on how many measures of agricultural produce their land yielded.
So he created a tax bracket system that doubled as a political hierarchy. Let's run through the classes. Who was at the top?
At the very top, you had the pentakosiomedimnoi.
Pentakosiomedimnoi. Try saying that 3 times fast.
It translates to 500 measurement. These were the super rich. Their estates produced 500 bushels of grain or measures of oil. And because they produced the most, they were eligible for the highest offices. Archon, general, treasurer. They paid the most taxes, but they held the executive power.
Okay, next level down.
The hippeis. This means knights or horsemen. They produced 300 measures. The name tells you their social function. They were rich enough to own and maintain a war horse, so they served as the cavalry in the army.
Then the middle class?
The zeugete, the yokemen. They produced 200 measures. The term yoke refers to a yoke of oxen. These were the solid farmers, the backbone of the state.
And in a war?
In war, they could afford the bronze armor and shield to fight as hoplites, the heavy infantry.
And finally, the vast majority of people.
The thetes, anyone producing less than 200 measures. These were the manual laborers, the landless, the poor sharecroppers. Under the old system, these people were political zeros. They had no voice, no power, nothing.
Oh, Solon changes that.
He does. And this is the democratic breakthrough, even if it didn't look like full democracy yet. Solon admitted the thetes to the ecclesia, the assembly, and to the heliaia, which were the jury courts.
Okay, so they couldn't be archon. They couldn't run the city. But they could vote on who did run the city?
Yes, they could vote in elections. But even more powerful was the jury. Solon allowed the common people to sit in judgment of the powerful. If an archon was corrupt, or stole money, or abused his power, a jury of common citizens could put him on trial after his term was over.
That is huge. Accountability.
Aristotle called Solon the first people's champion because of this. He didn't give the poor the steering wheel, but he gave them the emergency brake. He gave them the power to protect themselves from the government.
It's a brilliant check and balance. The rich get the prestige of office, but they have to answer to the poor if they mess up.
Precisely. Solon also supposedly created a council of 100 men from each of the 4 tribes to steer the assembly and prepare its business. He compared the council and the old aristocratic court, the Areopagus, to 2 anchors holding the ship of state steady. He was obsessed with balance.
So he rewires the economy, he rewires the government, but he didn't stop there. He started getting into what we would call social engineering. And some of these laws are, frankly, weird.
They are weird to us, but they were very strategic. He wasn't just fixing laws, he was trying to fix the culture. Let's look at his economic policy. He banned the export of all agricultural products except for olive oil.
Why specifically olive oil?
Well, think about the terrain of Attica. It's rocky, it's dry, it's sun-baked. It is terrible for growing wheat, but olive trees.
They love that environment.
They love it.
Yeah.
Solon realized farmers were starving because they were trying to grow grain on land that wanted to grow olives. So he forced a shift. He pushed Athens toward a cash crop economy.
We are going to be the olive oil capital of the world.
And it worked. But think about the knock-on effects. If you're exporting massive amounts of oil, what do you need? You need containers. So the Athenian pottery industry explodes. Those famous black figure and red figure vases, that starts here.
Right.
And you need ships to carry the oil, so the merchant navy expands.
Which eventually turns Athens into a naval superpower.
Exactly. One law about olives eventually leads to the Athenian Empire. It's an incredible chain of events.
He also had a law about fathers and sons, right? Something about trades.
Yes. He decreed that a father must teach his son a trade. If he didn't, the son had no legal obligation to care for the father in his old age.
I love that. Teach me a skill, Dad, or you're on your own when you're 80.
It was brilliant. Athens was attracting immigrants, but they couldn't own land. Solon needed to give them a way to survive. He wanted to dignify labor. In many aristocratic societies, working with your hands was considered shameful.
Right.
Solon said, no, a tradesman is a valuable citizen. He even offered citizenship to foreign craftsmen who moved their families to Athens permanently.
That's a brain drain strategy. Stealing the best talent from other cities.
It is. Now, here is the law that I think is the most provocative for us today. The law against neutrality.
This one blew my mind. Tell us about it.
Solon passed a law stating that if the city is in a state of stasis, civil strife, or civil war, any citizen who does not take up arms and pick a side is disenfranchised. You lose your citizenship.
That feels completely backwards. Usually we think the good citizens are the ones who stay out of the street fights. Solon is saying, if you don't fight, you're out.
It's so counterintuitive, but follow his logic. He was terrified of apathy. He believed that the fanatics, the extremists, the people who want to burn the city down, they're always motivated. They will always show up.
But the moderate, reasonable people just want to stay home and lock the doors.
Exactly. And if the reasonable people stay home, the fanatics win. Solon wanted to force the sensible center to get into the ring. He figured that if the moderates were forced to pick a side, they would dilute the extremism and bring about a settlement faster.
So neutrality isn't a virtue. It's a dereliction of duty.
He demanded skin in the game. If you want the rights of a citizen, you have to risk your safety for the state. It's a radical idea.
We also have to touch on his social laws regarding women and morality. This wasn't exactly a feminist paradise.
No, not at all. Solon's laws regarding women were restrictive and mostly focused on property. For example, he regulated dowries to prevent men from marrying just for money. And he had very specific laws for the epikleros, the heiress.
How did that work?
If a father died with no sons, his daughter carried the estate. But she didn't own it in the modern sense. Solon mandated that she had to marry her nearest paternal relative, usually an uncle or a cousin, to keep the property within the clan.
That sounds incredibly awkward. Sorry, you have to marry your uncle because of the real estate.
It was strictly business. Marriage was about the transmission of property and citizens. But Solon also regulated morality in other ways. There is a claim by the playwright Philemon that Solon established state-funded brothels.
The government ran the brothels.
That's the claim. The idea was to democratize pleasure, to make it affordable and available to all men, and supposedly to protect respectable women from seduction. It fits his theme of moderation and order, even if it seems strange to us.
And he also regulated the gymnasiums, the wrestling halls.
Yes, specifically regarding pederasty, the relationships between older men and boys. He banned slaves from entering the wrestling schools or engaging in these relationships. He was drawing a hard line. This is for citizens only. He was reinforcing the exclusivity of the citizen club.
Now, practically speaking, how did people know all these laws? Did they have, like, a handbook?
They had the axones. These were large wooden pillars. Some sources say they were four-sided. Some say triangular, that rotated on an axis. They were set up in the Prytaneum, the center of government.
So you could literally walk up, spin the pillar, and read the law.
Yes. It was a tangible, interactive user interface for the law. Before this, the law was whatever the noble judge said it was. Now, the law was written down, public, and accessible to anyone who could read. It was a huge step.
So, Solon does all this work. He rewires the economy, the government, the culture. He must be the most popular man in Athens.
Far from it. He was miserable. Because he compromised, he managed to annoy everyone. The rich were nagging him about their lost debts. The poor were nagging him about not getting any land. People were stopping him in the street to critique his poetry and his laws.
Sounds exhausting. So what does he do?
He pulls the ultimate mic drop. He extracts a solemn oath from the Athenians that they will not change his laws for 10 years, and then he leaves.
He just takes a vacation.
A 10-year vacation. A sabbatical. He realized that if he stayed, he would become a de facto tyrant. People would constantly ask him to interpret the laws or tweak them. He wanted the laws to rule, not Solon. He wanted the Athenians to learn to live by the written word without their daddy holding their hand.
That is profound self-restraint. So where did he go?
He went on a grand tour. He went to Egypt, which was seen as the center of ancient wisdom. He hung out with the pharaoh Amasis II and the priests of Sais.
Is this where the Atlantis connection comes in?
It is. According to Plato, the Egyptian priests told Solon the story of the lost civilization of Atlantis. Solon wrote it down, intending to turn it into an epic poem. He never finished it, but the notes passed down through his family to his descendant, Plato.
That's amazing. Solon is the reason we have the Atlantis myth. Where else did he go?
He went to Cyprus and helped a local king design a new capital city. The king was so grateful he named the city Soloi after him.
Nice to have a city named after you. But the most famous stop was Lydia, right? To meet King Croesus.
Yes, this is the centerpiece of Herodotus's history. Croesus was the king of Lydia, a man of unimaginable wealth. The phrase, rich as Croesus, exists for a reason.
So Solon, the wise philosopher, meets Croesus, the billionaire.
Croesus gives Solon the grand tour. He shows him the gold, the treasury, the jewels. He's flexing. And then he asks Solon a loaded question. Who is the happiest man you have ever seen?
And obviously he expects Solon to say, you, your majesty, it's you.
Naturally, but Solon thinks for a moment and names an obscure Athenian named Tellus.
Croesus must have been insulted. Who on earth was Tellus?
Solon explains. Tellus lived in a flourishing city. He had fine sons. He saw his grandchildren born, and he died a glorious death in battle defending his country and was honored with a public funeral.
So a good life and a good death.
Croesus is annoyed, but he asks, okay, who is the second happiest, expecting to be at least the runner-up? Solon names Cleobus and Biton, two brothers from Argos.
What was their story?
They were strong athletes who died in their sleep after performing a great act of devotion to their mother. Again, a noble life and a peaceful end.
Croesus finally snaps.
He yells, what about me? Is my happiness nothing to you? Look at all this gold.
And this is where Solon drops the wisdom bomb.
Solon says, count no man happy until he is dead.
That sounds incredibly grim.
It sounds grim, but it's practical. He explains to the king, Life is long and full of changes. You are rich today, but a lucky man is not the same as a happy man. Disaster can strike at any moment. Until the story is over, we can't judge the quality of the life.
He's saying happiness isn't a state of being. It's the final score at the end of the game.
Exactly. Croesus dismisses him as a fool and sends him away. But history has a way of proving Solon right. Years later, Croesus loses his kingdom to the Persians. He is captured by Cyrus the Great.
And he's about to be executed, right? Burned alive.
He is tied to a pyre to be burned alive, and as the flames are being lit, the reality hits him. He remembers Solon's warning, and he starts screaming, "Solon! Solon! Solon!"
Talk about a callback.
Cyrus hears him and asks, "Who are you calling for? Is it a god?" Croesus tells him the story of the Greek sage who warned him that wealth doesn't equal happiness. Cyrus is so moved by the story, realizing that he too is just a man whose luck could change, that he orders the fire extinguished and spares Croesus's life.
So Solon's philosophy literally saved a king's life years after he said it. That is a powerful legacy.
It is, but unfortunately his legacy back in Athens wasn't quite as secure.
Right. So Solon eventually returns to Athens after his 10 years. He's an old man now. Does he find the stable, law-abiding city he dreamed of?
Sadly, no. He returns to find the factions fighting again. The system was straining, and worst of all, a new threat was rising, a man named Pisistratus.
Who was Pisistratus?
He was a relative of Solon. He was a war hero, charismatic, and very ambitious. He was positioning himself as the champion of the hill, the poor. He was promising them the land redistribution that Solon had refused.
So he's a populist.
A classic populist demagogue. Solon saw right through him. He warned the Athenians. He went into the agora and told them, "He is a fox. Do not trust him." But the people were charmed.
Pisistratus pulled a stunt to get power.
Right.
A famous one.
The oldest trick in the book. He wounded himself, cut his own body, and had his mules wounded, and then rode into the marketplace covered in blood. He claimed his political enemies had tried to assassinate him because he loved the people so much.
Look what the elites did to me. I need protection.
Exactly. He asked the assembly for a bodyguard of club bearers. Solon begged them not to do it. He knew a bodyguard was the first step to a private army.
There's a dramatic image of Solon here that I really like. His last stand.
Yes. Old Solon, now in his 70s, went into his house, put on his full military armor, took his shield and spear, and stood outside his door.
What was he trying to say?
It was a symbolic protest. He told the Athenians, "I am holding out alone to defend my country and its laws." He called them cowards for letting Pisistratus fool them. He said, "It is easy to stop a tyranny while it is young, but hard to cut it down when it has grown tall."
But they didn't listen.
No, they voted for the bodyguard. Pisistratus used the club bearers to seize the Acropolis and declared himself tyrant.
That is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Solon spent his whole life trying to prevent tyranny, and he has to watch it happen right before he dies.
He died shortly after, around 560 BC. His ashes were scattered by his request on the island of Salamis, the island he won back for Athens.
So we have to ask the hard question. Was Solon a failure?
If you look at the short term,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, the Constitution failed, tyranny took over. But if you zoom out, absolutely not.
How so?
Because Pisistratus, the tyrant, was actually a smart guy. He didn't tear up Solon's laws. He kept the structure. He kept the archons, the assembly, the courts. He just made sure his friends won the elections.
So the hardware remained, even if the software was hacked.
Exactly. And because the structure survived, the idea survived. Solon had broken the monopoly of the bloodline aristocracy. He established the principle that a citizen is someone who participates in justice.
That idea of the jury, that a poor man can judge a rich man, that didn't go away.
It didn't. Solon created the mental space for democracy. He planted the seeds. It took another generation for Cleisthenes to come along and do the next round of reforms, and then Pericles later on. But Solon did the heavy lifting. He moved Athens from a tribal oligarchy to a state based on written law.
And he did it by refusing to be a tyrant himself. That's the thing that sticks with me. He had the power. He could have been Pisistratus, but he chose to walk away.
He chose the law over himself. And I think the best way to sum him up is to go back to his poetry. He used that metaphor of the shield.
The shield of might.
He wrote, "Before them both I held my shield of might, and let not either touch the other's right." He saw himself as the protector of both the rich and the poor.
Protecting the rich from the poor's desire for total confiscation, and protecting the poor from the rich's desire for slavery.
And that is a thankless job. You end up hated by both sides. But that is the burden of a true lawgiver. He wasn't trying to be popular. He was trying to be just.
It's a fascinating legacy. And I can't stop thinking about that neutrality law we discussed. That seems like the most relevant takeaway for us.
The law against apathy.
Yes. We live in such a polarized world now. You often hear people say, I hate politics, it's toxic, I just want to stay out of it, I'm just going to tend my garden.
And Solon would say that is the most dangerous attitude of all.
Exactly. He would tell us that neutrality isn't a virtue, it's a surrender. He would say that if you care about the stability of your state, you have to get in the ring. You have to pick a side.
Or at least pick up your shield and stand for something. Because if the reasonable people disengage, the unreasonable people take over.
Well, on that provocative note, we will leave you to think about Solon, the poet-politician who invented the citizen. Thanks for diving deep with us.
It was a pleasure.
See you next time.